Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here with us. I'm Elle Griffin. I'm the editor-in-chief of Utah Business, and today we are going to be having a conversation about the future of HR. Today, I'm going to be talking with a couple people who know a little bit about the subject. We've got Eliza Garn. She's the VP of Thought Leadership and Brand Marketing at GBS Benefits, and she's the Executive Director of Utah SHRM. We also have Jared Olson. He's the Head of Customer Success at Motivosity. And we have JD Conway, who's the Head of Talent Acquisition at Bamboo HR. Welcome, everyone.
Hello.
Oh.
So we've got a bunch of attendees on the line, so I do want to let them know that those of you who are attending live, feel free to use the chat panel to talk with us or to ask questions on the Q&A, and I'll make sure we incorporate those into the conversation. But before we do that, I just want to dive in. I met Jared at a photo shoot for one of Utah Business events, and he said something to me like, hey, you know what? HR is not as old school as it used to be, and there's actually some ways that we can monetize it and make this way more cool and happening and awesome. And so I wanted to start with Jared's idea, and then we'll go from there. So Jared, why don't you tell me how you kind of see the future of HR? Sorry.
Yeah, and thank you guys so much for having us. I have to say that I love Elisa and JD. And we've had a lot of these conversations together, and so it's going to be a lot of exciting to just see all the things that they have to say as well. And I'd love to kind of dive into the future of HR and how we've seen it evolve with time and where we see it going to this human experience world. So anyway, the idea that Elle and I initially talked about had to do with the talent shortage issue that we're having in Utah. I go to so many events and Silicon Slopes and SHRM and all these different groups, and we just keep hearing about like the shortage and that there's not enough talented people in the state. And having an HR background, one of my biggest pet peeves is how offended certain leaders get when somebody leaves the company. And I feel like we're ignoring a lot of the data. The data shows us that, millennials, for example, are sticking around for 3 to 4 years, and then they're off to a new opportunity. And when I look at myself, I'm a 3 to 5 year person, and it's because lots of things happen. I feel like I've checked the boxes for the employer. I maybe want a new change of scenery or new challenges. Maybe I want to work for a startup. Maybe I want to go to a more established company. And I don't think that's anything bad that's on the company. I think it's just a reality of how individuals change with time. And so my idea about this talent shortage and something that JD and Elisa and I have all talked about in the past is, why don't we just share talent more often? And so here's the framework. The framework is, let's just say average retention is 3 years. We should be going as HR professionals to our employees that have been there for 2.5 years. And we should say, statistically speaking, you're probably going to start looking for a job. Well, instead of hiding, changing in the bathroom and going to interview somewhere else or whatever it might be, why don't you just tell us that you're looking? We as HR professionals have amazing networks, and so do CTOs, so do marketing professionals, so does everyone. Like, we have our little communities, and the HR one in Utah is strong and thriving. And so why don't we turn to our HR colleagues and say, hey, I've got a top performer, somebody that is super good. We're devastated to lose them, but the reality is we're not going to be able to keep them regardless of what they do. They just need a new challenge. And so we facilitate an introduction. And so JD's over at Bamboo HR. So maybe he's in need of a graphic designer. And Elisa has a graphic designer on her team at GBS that's looking to leave. And so she says, hey, have you heard of Bamboo? I got a good friend JD over there. Let me do an introduction for you. Now, when you think of the time to hire, to post a position, to interview, when somebody leaves a position, the lost revenue that happens in bringing somebody up to speed, we could really shorten that cycle if Elisa went to JD and said, I'm going to give you this person's employee file, or I'm going to give you their graphic design work, and I want you to see how great they are. And to be honest, this is the reason they want to leave. Here's what they want in their next opportunity. I think you'd be a great fit for that. That makes it a lot faster for JD to hire. It helps with Elisa's succession plan, and it also helps the employee leave as a promoter. Because I know when I leave a company, I typically leave as kind of a detractor, and I think that's normal. I think, hey, that's a great place to work for a few years, and you need to know A, B, and C when you go to that company, because that's what they want. I don't leave saying best place ever, because I obviously left. And so if we can help our employees get to the next opportunity that really excites them, they should leave as a promoter. They should leave and tell their friends, oh my gosh, GBS was amazing. Not only did I have a great experience working with Lisa, but they introduced me to my next job at Bamboo HR. And so it makes a lot of sense for the recruiting company, the current company, and the employee on a lot of different levels. And so I think we just need to start thinking of talent shortage in this different light. And instead of saying we're offended when you leave the company, we say, when you work for us, we're the kind of company that will be a catalyst for your career. And we will help you get to new levels because we care more about you than we do about a specific position. And if you succeed, then we succeed as a company, whether you succeed with us or somewhere else. Now, the other advantage this does for both GBS and for Bamboo HR is it strengthens their relationships. Next time Elisa needs to hire someone, she can call JD and say, hey, who do you have that's looking to leave your company? And it's a quicker hire and ability to share talent within the state. So that was kind of the initial idea of what we had talked about. Is that an okay recap of the discussion, Elle?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to elaborate that because I see so many different uses for that. I mean, if you can create a workflow, then not only when a company is letting somebody go to another company, but they can also pull somebody in who might be better suited to the current challenges that company is facing. I just see so many benefits to that as opposed to this whole weird secretive, I'm secretly applying, and the company being like, I secretly need to hire people, but none of us are aware of our intentions. It makes so much sense.
Yeah.
What do you guys
I want to
think?
elaborate on a point there because it's so interesting when I think, just like anywhere, you have your social cast of who you talk to and the people that I think of my LinkedIn following. And it's so interesting because I feel like everybody knows and believes the things that I know and believe because those are the people that are constantly engaging with my topics. But in the business community, especially in Utah, we keep saying there's a talent shortage and we have this war on talent. And I've heard that for 5-6 years, ever since the economy shifted and it became a candidate-driven market. But here's what's fascinating to me about that topic and that idea. I know people that are unemployed. I know people that are struggling to find a job that are reaching out in tears because they have been interviewing for months and are always the bridesmaid and never the bride. And so they're looking for what can I do? What could I possibly change about my process to finally get an offer? So, to tag onto what Jared is saying here, I feel like there's such an innovative opportunity for not just HR, but businesses to invest in the elevation of talent when they're with the organization. If we can help people grow to another potential of preparing them for the next leap of wherever they go, we just do such a disservice of hiring somebody based on the black and white version of the person that they are from their resume, and then plug them into the company and expect them to be able to perform 100% of the job functions day one, which apparently means they're not going to grow at all because they've already done it and you're hiring for the perfect candidate. But then we expect them to do that job, and unless there is some sort of promotion opportunity or growth potential in the organization, we do not prioritize investing in that individual's growth, which means the next time they're looking for work, whether it's through layoff or termination or they're looking to leave, if they do stay within the organization, we have missed capitalizing on their discretionary effort because they're no longer engaged. They're showing up for a paycheck and exchanging time for money. So it's no longer about, I'm serving a mission, I'm doing more, I'm learning and growing as I'm helping this company meet its objectives. It's about, this is a means to an end, and I can't wait until I punch out and I can finally go home and be with my family and do the things I actually care about. But if we invest in their growth and can offer them something, which we know has been proven through study after study, very credible studies, that if we provide something for an individual to learn and to grow themselves, that's already a trigger of an engagement or of engagement. So if we can tie in Jared's idea to another level of creating training and development programs that help people grow with the existing needs of the organization, but also align with that individual's career path or progression, whether it's a lattice or a ladder, career that they're looking for, I do think that we'll get a little bit more bandwidth from them as far as like years of service or maybe even months of service in today's day and age. But the opportunity there of cross collaboration and mentorship and the things that can be gained from their wisdom at rest within your organization seems like such a compelling idea that I really don't think many companies tap into.
Yeah, I love what we're chatting about right now. It's funny. I feel like, so Jared and I have discussed this in the past, this idea and these ideas of consortiums. The exciting thing in Utah is that I feel like we already have some advancement towards that. Now, this is specific to the early times of the pandemic all affecting us, but we partnered. So there are a few members of my team on at Bamboo HR that made a LinkedIn page called Utah Layoffs. They brought in other recruiters from other companies. They went out and partnered with Salt Lake Shurham, who was already making some posts about that, and wanted to bring that coalescence together to try to help job seekers the best they could. With some companies, I'll tell you, direct to consumer right now, most of those companies are exploding. So we have this kind of shift and offset from one industry to another. So that idea that Jared originally talked about, even if you're not monetizing it right away, Utah is already doing some very cool things. It feels like a more tight-knit HR business community in that way as a result. And you see some evidences of that. So it's been very encouraging to see that. And I know I've developed consortiums in my past experience in talent acquisition with other companies, with other third-party recruiters to try to say, hey, this person is amazing. I don't have the exact right thing for them. Do you have anything? Right. And so this idea of just being able to have forums and places to develop a consortium, even pre monetization of that idea, that's evolution of HR and moving forward. What you're really doing is helping, and as a result, people know what kind of human resources and business professional you are. They know what kind of business you are. That just speaks to the importance of the human experience, and that even if your company is going through a rough time, you are quickly communicating the people that were affected by that and trying to help them with an outplacement kind of function. In fact, on our team over here as well, there's been several times where we've performed that kind of outplacement function where we first looked internally everywhere for someone. And we said, no, okay, none of these things are exactly dialed in right. We didn't have all of the resources we needed to create an amazing L&D program early on, right? And so let's see what we can do to help them in their next transition. So I did a few of those, and there are other members of my team that did that, where we were helping with that outplacement and transition already. So as a precursor to what Jared was talking about, and much of that is formed in the business community and the trust that we can have with each other, and that we're actually helping other companies with great people who just didn't have the perfect right skill set, and they kind of recognized it. We're helping them with that transition. And to Elisa's point, L&D programs, I see a vast need for the evolution of HR for a lot more investment there, because that idea that she was speaking to of a talent shortage, well, I feel the same way as Elisa does. So as we've talked, the three of us agree on so many different things that need to change in the future. And with this evolution of HR, I think one key aspect of that is that organizations, businesses need to really take deeper looks at learning and development programs and upskilling, and continually doing that because technology and innovation is almost outpacing our ability to train humans to keep up with that. So we have to continually look at softwares and people that are well trained for learning and development, training and development. That really is vital, I think, for the evolution of HR. And it's really exciting that it's under that umbrella of human resources, because it adds to that human experience that Jared was talking about.
I'd imagine that there would also be some crossover, just like if a business knows that this school is very good at engineering and we need to hire lots of engineers, we have a partnership with that school to recruit at that school to get engineers coming in entry level. I imagine it could work that way with businesses as well, where you're saying, okay, this company is in a similar industry to me, or this has the same job function that we use, so we'll always take employees from that company into ours, or kind of create these workflows. Do you see that being a common thing?
I think that already happens. I mean, when I worked for a local recruiting firm for 4 years, and one of our clients was Goldman Sachs. And one of our sells to candidates to take these positions, which were entry level, very minimal pay, recent grads, and you just worked 70 plus hours a week, which for a lot of people is like, why in the world would you do that? But the sell was, you do it for 2 years, you can go anywhere. Because they have the prestige, like people know what it takes to be able to get through that. I do, play a little bit of devil's advocate. I do think that that could be somewhat damaging, where you can, kind of encroach a little bit into bias and expectations, and you're sort of dehumanizing expectations a little bit, where, I mean, people are still people. I could work at a certain company and be a top performer, but maybe I just didn't align with those corporate values, or the way that they wanted work done didn't align with my style. So it's not necessarily like the end all be all indicator that that's going to be the match. But back to what Jared was saying, his whole, this whole idea that he's proposing, there are organizations out there that have these brand reputations of, for example, leadership programs. So American Express and GE are notorious for how much they invest in the output of leaders that they provide through the learning and development programs that they've created, with an emphasis on leadership development. So I do think that it can be done, but when you're talking about the landscape of Utah business, which is primarily comprised of startups, small to mid-sized businesses, we a lot of times don't have those same resources. We don't have that name recognition. And so we rely so heavily on the embedded, the threads that connect us within our community of word of mouth. And, certain universities have different viewpoints and opinions tied to them as well. So although I agree on a whole level, there is definitely a micro level that I want us to be cautious of as HR leaders and business leaders, that you still need to humanize all of this. Like, you have to treat people like individual people. Not personalizing an experience will not work in the future of work. It just won't. Everything around us is a personalized experience now. And if work doesn't stay on track with that, then the companies that are innovating there and leading, they're going to get the best candidates, and everyone else is going to be stuck with everyone else.
Something I think that a human experience we're hungry for as individuals is information and knowledge. And so we've got to become a lot more transparent. And I think the future of HR is less red tape. We create so many do's and don'ts, and you can't ask this and you can't ask that, and you can and you can't. And like we've got to change that to where we start thinking differently about our people. And instead of thinking about our people at our company, we just see people. And when we just see people and we want them to succeed, so this is when this miraculous stuff can happen, where all of a sudden recruiting and finding people from colleges or passing them between companies is so cool. And one of those ways that I would love to see more transparency in our profession is HR typically oversees performance management. And so we coach leaders on providing effective feedback and having one-on-one conversations, and we are the stewards of the employee file. Why do we hold that so close to the chest? And yes, typical HR right now is going to be saying, because that's like what we've been trained and what we have to do, and you have to be careful. And I want to look at the opportunity cost. The opportunity cost to me of sharing somebody's employee file with another company may mean that it helps my succession plan. It helps that individual find something they'll be more happy with. And it means that it's maybe better for multiple businesses. And people want that information. So we shouldn't be so you can and can't. I think we need to start looking differently. And that's part of why I think the stereotype of HR is what it is. You think of the policy police and not thinking of HR as a profit center. So I'll just share this kind of idea quickly, that let's just look at recruiting in general. If we have 5 candidates that come in and interview with us, we're going to hire one of the 5, which means that 4 people are leaving as detractors. But if we can help place those 4 people in other companies, maybe we give the personality assessments, we give other assessments we do. If they're software developers, the code that they wrote for us, and we invest hours with candidates, maybe 4+ hours with one person. And if I can go to another company down the road and say, hey, I just spent 4 hours with this person. If I had 2 positions open, I'd hire them, but I don't. Are you interested in interviewing them? And instead of me going back to the candidate saying, sorry, you're not in, the answer is, hey, I think I found a better opportunity for you that's better for your needs and what you're looking for. And if they place them, I get a placement fee. And maybe my HR department all of a sudden, with not hiring people, is making money by facilitating these introductions. And so you have to be cautious there, like Elisa talked about, of not just making a process and focusing on the human, but if we do it the right way, it makes sense for the business and it makes sense for the individual.
I would imagine that that also eliminates a very, very common problem, which is 2 weeks notice. 2 weeks
Yes.
notice sends every company scrambling, oh my gosh, I've suddenly got to replace this person in a quick period of time when there might not even be somebody available, and this person is going to have to train somebody else that we're not going to have time for, and now we don't know the skills that that person had or was doing, and that is such a struggle, those 2 weeks. I imagine if we were saying, hey, thank you for giving me this talent, let's work together to like see how that's going to work out well for everybody. Can I have this talent for a month so they can train the next person, and then you can take the person on after that for onboarding? I imagine there's all kinds of scenarios where that would solve.
So there's a chat that just came in, and I just pulled it up from Ira Wolf. And I love the fact that she's talking about blockchain in HR. Oh my gosh. As a matter of fact, a good friend of mine, one of the original founders of HireView, another local Utah company, is building out a blockchain company called Atlas, which is all about taking the information through blockchain of everything from background check information to employment data. So you put it in there and then you own it forever, and you can just give a key to employers or mortgage companies or whoever needs to just verify that information without all of this wasted work and time and effort that goes into just doing that over and over and over again, and a complete lack of consistency with results as well. So although I agree with the original comment that yeah, I think that's going to disrupt and is already changing the HR profession, I don't know if this particular dialogue of these ideologies are exactly correlated with the idea of blockchain, because again, there is still a human element here. I don't think that recruiters will 100% be replaced by machine learning and AI, because there's still some work that needs to be done by a person when you have a person coming into a culture add situation of what exists within the organic nature of working with a group of people. But already we're seeing more and more automation as it relates to screening. And if any of you follow Ben Taylor, he's one of the world leaders on artificial intelligence, specifically in this space. He just spoke at our conference last week, and the data that's available about how even machine learning and AI is starting to introduce bias into the recruiting process is fascinating to me. Because the whole reason that we were excited about it in HR was because it was supposed to solve that problem, take out the human element of those subconscious biases to be able to hire more diversity and create inclusive environments, when in reality, it's still human beings that created the technology that is doing the screening. And so there's still a layer of bias there. So anyway, that was a little bit of a tangent, but I just thought that comment was so interesting. And I do think there is, that could be a whole topic in and of itself of the adaptation of technology for our profession. But JD, it looked like you had something to say.
Yeah, and I think to both of these points, it's the experience overhaul, right? We've talked about the experience economy for years now, and how quickly that can and needs to adapt in all facets of human resource functions. So when you're looking at other HR functions, this is how I view talent acquisition, which again puts me in a very different spot. A lot of organizations can be very process-driven, checkbox, right? And back to that, they're looking for that automation so they can eliminate the human touch points. To the contrary, we are trying to automate that which we can automate, but humanize everything else that is absolutely needed for it. And when you go look up the research on this and the statistics that point to all of the performance metrics that happen when people have a better candidate experience, my whole purpose over here is trying to create a better candidate experience as much as we possibly can, because that leads to a better onboarding experience, a better employee experience, and that continually builds. So you talk about, value centers like Jared brought up earlier. You can clearly see the difference between what an organization was and what it becomes in performance increasing, engagement increasing, overall human experience being much better. And we have to create these environments where we are transparent about our objectives and where we're at with that. So Jared spoke as well about the transparency that's needed. That is one experience point that I hope business leaders immediately latch onto. The more transparency you have in all of these areas, you don't have these "I'm leaving in 2 weeks" problems, right? People feel if you have the environment and culture for comfort to be able to talk about where you're struggling or what you're looking at in the future, you can find opportunities within an organization if you have more time to do so. You can look at upskilling people if you have more time to do so. You can try to figure out a lot of different things for employees if they feel comfortable enough to be transparent about what they actually want to do in their career path, where they want to move, where they want to go. Do they have the skill sets for it? There are a lot of people that will experiment in a new field and then we'll find out that they did not want to do that. How many people got their
or go to
undergraduate
college for
degree?
4 years and pay $35,000 to learn they
Right.
don't want to do that.
Right. How many people studied weird ancient languages and then said, what have I done? And went directly and loved it, but did not want to do that as a career. So there are so many people that are in that scenario, that situation, and organizations can help them find other pathways within and without. But the key is having a better experience, and one key component of that is transparency. Being the type of comfortable culture and environment where you can be open about your long-term objectives and what you want to do.
So can I add to that? I think that the business leaders and businesses for sure have to be more transparent. I think it's also up to employees to be more transparent and transparent about what their individual why is, their intrinsic motivators. And, yesterday I had an interview with someone, and as I interviewed with them, he said, "Hey, so my biggest motivator is my family. And what that means for this position right now is that if you hire me, you're going to let me work from home until I can figure out working arrangements and all that type of stuff." And I love the transparency and honesty of connecting the dots of here's what matters to me and how that actually aligns to the position. But part of where this creativity of advancing HR comes in is the transparency of saying, what are we really trying to do? And I'm going to give an extreme example here, but an idea I really love is really considering if we hire one or multiple people. So, and this idea stems from I love my wife, right? And I want to spend more time with my kids, and I know she needs a break from the home as well as a stay-at-home mom, and that's just kind of her choice. And she occasionally wants to get out, and I occasionally want to go in. And so, what if Motivosity, instead of just hiring me to put in 40 plus hours a week, hired my wife and I? And we decide who wants to go in which day and what we're going to be doing for that day. And obviously there are different skill sets and things that come in. It is kind of a messy idea, but a really good illustration of how this would work is like a bank teller. So if you had a bank teller, they sit in the same desk or same place from 8 to 5. And at the end of the day, we probably don't care how long one person sits there. We just need someone. So what if you hired a newlywed college family, or what if it's just even an individual and their best friend or something like that, and you said, "Hey, we just need someone in this chair from 8 to 5. We don't care who comes and when you come. Amongst the two of you, figure out who will be here." And I love that idea because it really fosters this idea of work-life synergy. What's the word? Synergy, transparent, there's a lot of different ways you can call it. But it's not just a balance. It's like we're living our life. And there's some days where a college student may have more homework and the other person doesn't. And so can they just manage that themselves and saying, "Hey, today I'm going to go in and tomorrow you're in," or "Hey, let's go 4 hours and 4 hours." And so how do we vocalize, here's what my individual needs are in our state of life? And as a father, I want to help Motivosity, but I also some of the time don't. Sometimes I just want to be with my kids. And so how do we change that perception so that the expectation is not you are here doing this all of the time, but instead we need someone with the skill set that can help, and you help us figure that out.
Well, and on top of that, when you look at the impact of shared ownership in that particular example you gave, again, it's extreme and there's so many layers of course, my HR compliance brain, all the bells are like, "No, you can't do that. How are you going to manage performance?" But really and truly, the impact that creates is it's no longer you have ownership to a company. It's you now have ownership to each other. So you have to work out, like if somebody is sick or if they don't show up to work or if they're not pulling their weight, it's no longer like just the manager or the company coming to them and saying, look, we need to have that conversation because you're not meeting the requirements here. You've got somebody else's job that's on the line and their income relies on it too. And what I love when you've talked about this before, Jared, in other settings, in different examples, because when you hire someone, you hire their spouse, you hire the iceberg of everything that comes along with them. It doesn't necessarily that they're going to be physically in your brick and mortar location doing the work, but you are hiring a unit. Because you need that spouse's support. You need them on board with the company. You need them supporting their spouse to be able to go into work and do what's necessary to be able to meet the objectives and have understanding and align with the benefits and all of that. So I think in a way it already exists, but we're so focused on, we hire that top level of the iceberg resume of a person and everything else underneath we just pretend disappears when they cross the threshold of the doorway walking into our company. But if you really redesign that, and if we're truly talking about the future of our profession, it basically means we're going to create goggles that can see underwater super clearly and continue to celebrate our employees instead of tolerate them for everything that they are and that they're bringing to the company instead of just the parts that we want to see.
And when you talk about transparency, when was the last time your company talked to employees' spouses or confidants or parents or whatever it is? Like, we don't share company data with them. We say hi to them at a company party. And this year, that's going to be like, you might even have a company party because it'll be virtual. And so are you connecting with your employees' families? I'm going to guess you're probably not. And when we talk about transparency, how can you? Well, the next time you have a performance review or even a one-on-one conversation, why don't you say, hey, does your spouse want to come in and join us for this? I would love to get to know them. I'd love to hear their thoughts. Or let's go to lunch or I'll send you a Grubhub to your house and we'll do a virtual Zoom call. And like, I just want to get to know your family. Like, what's on your mind? What are your concerns? And the advantage of that is that I think the most important conversations that happen like during pillow talk time. We as employees nod our head to our boss. And when we go home, we tell our spouse an unfiltered view of the truth. And when we're having pillow talk, we say, I think I'm going to leave. Like, I think I'm going to start job searching. And when our spouse says, yeah, you should, then we do it. Imagine if the spouse said, you can't. You have the best opportunity. And I love this company and they care about our family. You got to stick around. That's way more impactful than what a manager can do. So like that transparency, sharing that information with spouses and even with kids, like we need to do that so that they're fans. I heard my son the other day talking to his friends. They were playing together in a room and they started talking about Motivasti. And my son was like, I'm going to work at Motivasti one day. They have a hoverboard in the office. And he was just going off on all the little things that we have. But like that made a difference to me and to my wife that like, okay, our kids are on board with what our company is doing.
Very interesting idea. I have to say, the feminist in me is rebelling a little bit about this whole situation. I personally feel like my husband should not be involved in my career, and I shouldn't have to be involved in his. And we should be able to do our own thing with our company, not requiring the presence of a spouse at a dinner party or something to make the unit feel whole. Like I feel like there's some equality issues that could come up there, especially if somebody doesn't have a spouse or, you know, is single, or for somebody that doesn't have kids versus somebody that does. I see there being some issues there, but I think the underlying thing that you're saying is super true, which is that right now we're paying employees for blocks of 40 hours, so to speak, worth of work, and then we're trying to like fill that docket with stuff. Whereas I do see that a move towards a more project-based compensation package where, hey, I'm going to pay you to take on this project. Do you want to take on this project too? That's an extra this rate. Do you want to take on this project too? I have another 3-month block of projects coming up. Would you be able to take that on for December through February? You know, I see that definitely being more of a conversation, to your point, whereas then the employee can say, okay, right now school's starting and I need to be home with my kids. I can't take on that extra project right now, but if you have other projects coming up in January, I'm all on board. Like, I definitely see that blocking out happening for sure.
Yeah, and Elle, one of the things that I recently kind of been studying on that, because it's so messy, as you said. There's a cause that a lot of people are saying we should have less HR, and we should reallocate funds of HR to leadership, because what we're trying to do with the human experience is really connect with individuals. And how can one department have a relationship with everyone when it really should be the manager and the employee? And so I was listening to Radical Candor again recently, and one of the things that I love that she says is she went into the office one day, had all these important things to do, and she was first stopped by an employee, and the employee said, "Hey, I've got to go. I got a family emergency, and let me tell you really quickly about it." And it drained her. And then she walked around and saw another person who said, "My daughter just had this great celebration, and let me tell you about it." And that emotionally drained her. And as she was trying to get to her office, she was focusing on her people. And by the time she got to her office, she said, "I didn't have any energy to do what mattered." And then she said, "What matters, quote unquote, is people and understanding them." So these ideas that we're tossing out there right now, they definitely do not work for everyone. It should not be a mandatory thing for a company. It should be individualized. And that's what a human experience is. That's the future of HR, is helping managers understand their people well enough to be able to customize these type of things for their individual needs.
I think one key to all of that is what we've already seen is that companies are starting to re-engineer jobs and what jobs can and should be. They're trying to engineer flexibility into them. They are trying to rethink. In fact, I propose that most people looking at organizations should be looking at companies that are trying to innovate here, because they are trying to allow for many different types of scenarios of one's personal life or like actual life needs. These are vital things to consider now. And what's really exciting about human resources is that the field is absolutely needed to look at this. And we have the people, analytics, and data to be able to even make aggregated decisions for larger companies and corporations when we understand what companies or what employees need at companies, and we're able to survey that information, and we're able to really get real-time information from managers. I think about, it's a little bit easier to be nimble in these things when you're a smaller organization. You can make some very impactful changes, and you can test and try it out and see how it impacts people's lives. But these larger corporations, they have the data now to be able to make these kinds of decisions. They have to make a concerted effort. And I think that's part of the evolution of HR, is really looking at the data to understand all the variables of human experience. One interesting thing that has been talked about the last several months is employee assistance programs, right? Addressing the fact that people have real life difficulties, struggles, trials. And while the employer does not need to know all of those personal details, when you have the right kind of environment, people may share those things, and you can adjust work for that if it's built into your models, your jobs. Elle, as you were talking about, if there's some type of flexibility where you pay for the project, whatever it is. But these employee assistance programs are employers trying to address that need as well, saying people clearly have very difficult things that happen in their lives, and we are going to allocate funds toward that to take care of them. We're going to try to figure out new ways to make sure that there's not just psychological safety at the workplace, but support for difficulties outside of it. Even if we don't know all the details of it, we don't need to, but at the same time, we need to allow a place for them to go. And I think a lot is being put on employers nowadays, because a third of your life is there. If somebody goes through a very difficult divorce or just very difficult life situations, then employers are thinking about these things. And that's what's important. The evolution of HR is and should be in its future to really think about all the variables of the human experience and what can we do to help.
It's interesting because I've found that there's been sort of a revolt of employees and talent. You know, we use that word interchangeably with employees, but arguably the people that are expecting more from the workplace, I don't even think it's necessarily tied to a generation, although some would argue against that. People are tired of, again, I used this phrase before, but we're tired of exchanging time for money. And so they're looking for opportunities where they can make a living, and they can meet, you know, their obviously their monetary needs, and but it's no longer about this. I go to college, I get a job, I stay with the company for 30 years, I retire, and then I travel with my significant other. Like that ideal is no longer the ideal. And I think that because companies have been so slow to adopt this new wave of what the four of us are talking about here today, they're coming to us and say, fine, if you're not willing to give me what I want, I'm not going to work for you, but you can hire me as a consultant at an inflated rate. And so now HR is being tasked with, I mean, this is borderline now. I don't even know if it's future, but we have to figure out how to motivate, inspire, engage, and manage talent, whether it's bought, rented, or leased, because we no longer just hire employees to do work. The gig economy is still continuing to rise. It was projected to be, I don't know, I think something like 44% of the workplace by 2020, which it's not there yet, but it's definitely on its way there. It's in the 30%-ish area. So when you think about how much work, like just how work gets done is changing, and how that affects even the laws associated with pay, and how you can have oversight into somebody's work, but still knowing that you have tasks that need to be completed inside your company in order to meet its objectives and goals and growth. You have to look at that part of the equation too, of like, you know, JD's talking a bit about dancing around mental health. Mental health is such a huge spotlighted topic in our industry this year. It should have been forever, because it's something that has always been happening, but companies have not been forced to address it because they've had the dotted line of like, oh, you just, here's a number to the EAP, the Employee Assistance Program, call them, you get free counseling sessions, and bleh, don't talk to me about it. That's not okay anymore. After suffering like 2 major natural disasters this year, windstorms and earthquakes and COVID, and having to go to remote work and feeling isolated, and layoffs and furloughs and instability, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the bottom of our pyramid is crumbling. It is crumbling. Even if you're feeling secure with your own job and your own company, the influence of what's happening around you, to your neighbors, to your family members, to your friends, that conversation is turmoil for us. And the stress is elevated to a level that companies can no longer just say, call the EAP. It is now becoming front and center of the conversation. And when we talk about future of HR, I agree with something that Jared said, that it's more about investing in the leadership potential and capability inside your organization, and getting away from where we have promoted people, which is, you're great at your job, you'd probably be great at making other people great. Or you've been here a really long time, let's give you a promotion. Or, okay, you've tapped out on your pay band, we can't pay you anymore unless we put you into a supervisor role. And many times when we do that at companies, we end up disengaging that high performer because they were doing great in the role that they were in. But leadership doesn't come from any of those ancillary items that I just talked about. It comes from just this internal motivation to help others succeed and be better. And if you don't have that capability or even passion within the career environment, you've just done such a disservice and stunted your growth as an organization, because you can't, people who don't lead can't lead others. And so it's, you know, this whole conversation about where we go from here, like I think there's tactical things that are happening to our profession that we're having to react to, that are going to innovate and change in our daily lives of what we do. But then there's also just the psychological impact of where we go and what we can do as the element of business that represents the people side of our organizations.
I do want to take something you said, because we actually got a question, so that was relevant. You spoke a lot about what a company should provide ethically to its employees in terms of emotional support, physical support, financial support. So my questions are, one, if those things are considered ethical to provide, then isn't that also an issue because not all companies are rich enough to provide them? You know, you can expect, and Amazon, for example, should be providing certain benefits to its workers because they're doing super well and they're a very wealthy organization. Whereas a startup with 2 people and no funding might not be able to offer that same support, or a person working at McDonald's might not be able to get the same support. So when you're talking Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the bottom is crumbling. Well, the bottom aren't necessarily working for organizations that have the financial resources to provide those needs to their employees. So my question is in two parts. One, what does the company ethically, what should they provide to their employees? And two, where does the non-compete sit in that? We had a question about non-competes, and we recently did an article on Utah Business on whether or not non-competes are ethical, because same thing, a lot of times the organizations that have non-competes, the people that have them installed they're only specialized in that field, and so they necessarily have to get a job in that field if they lose their job. So what are the ethics here?
Well, first point I would make is creating an environment of psychological safety does not cost $1. I mean, that's more in the actions and behaviors that you emit as an organization to help people feel like they are okay. You know, that there's the understanding that you're going through something, that, you know, even just like open, transparent communication, which Jared talked about earlier. What's happening in the company? Are we actually going to be experiencing layoffs? Like, where are we financially as an organization? And I understand the complexities. That's not always appropriate or okay to share at a granular level. But in HR, we're often the ones that get to be the bearer of bad news when we ourselves are either impacted or did not know anything about it. So we get called into a meeting and it's like, okay, we need you to go lay off 20% of the workforce. Here's the list of names. Go get it done. And by the way, make sure we don't get sued. And so all of a sudden we're in this role of, okay, we have to be the humanitarian here. We have to be the administrator. We have to be the coordinator of, you know, making sure to protect the company, but we're also trying to humanize the experience, and it's a mess. So going back to how can companies do this with minimal to low budgets? There are certainly some resources of, you know, like some companies have on-site yoga studios, and they have massage therapists that come in, and they have on-site counselors. And I think that's great. I mean, I think that would be a cool perk if every company could do that, but you're also probably only going to connect with a very small sampling of your employees that are going to take advantage of those benefits. So the investment, the ROI on that doesn't totally make sense to me. But if you can have a culture of, again, this psychological safety to be able to have people know and trust the leadership, and if there is going to be bad news, they're not sitting there with anxiety for 2 weeks, not able to sleep because they don't know what the company's going to announce tomorrow, or they all of a sudden get that call from HR, hey, can you come to my office? Just sweaty palms thinking, am I getting fired? Like, what's going on? So those are really easy things to do. And we don't have enough time to go through all of them on the panel today, but I would absolutely encourage people to do some research on that, of how do you create an environment of psychological safety. And then a very brief point on the non-competes. I understand why they exist. You have some bad apples that get enticed and wooed over to a competitor that, in order for, you know, like the reason they wanted to hire that person is to collect and capitalize on the clientele they're bringing with them from whatever company. So I understand, but that's like, I agree. I just think that non-competes in today's day and age, you are taking away somebody's ability, especially if they're a salesperson, to be able to make a living and sustain themselves if you're telling them they cannot go work for anybody that does what they've been doing for some people 15, 20 years. Like, how do you tell them that you're not allowed to go do that for 18 months? You need to just sit still, go be a Walmart greeter until you're ready, and then you can go back to doing what you were doing. I don't know. I probably shouldn't be speaking on that from an HR point of view, but on a personal point of view, having had signed those before, I think they are extremely unfair and very much in favor of the company and not the person.
I would say the word that comes to mind is vulnerability. I think we need to encourage people to be more vulnerable. I also don't think there's one size that fits all. And so when it comes to a non-compete, we should be vulnerable if we're going to leave. One, we should be proactive in going to people saying, hey, you're probably going to start looking, as we've talked about. And if we do, they say, listen, this is all I know. Like, I want to go to a competitor. Then let's be vulnerable with each other and say, what's your plan? where would you start? Are you going to take our clients or aren't you? And like, if we genuinely have a relationship with the people that we work with, then we can be vulnerable with each other and we can say, here's the concern, and we can work through it. When we have managers meet with their employees, those conversations should be, hey, how are you doing? This has been a hard year on everyone for a lot of reasons. And how are you? How's your family? What questions do you have? How can we help? And when you create that secure environment, like Elisa was talking about, people will be able to open up and they'll be vulnerable with you. And then you can, in a human experience mindset, say, what is best for this person? And if what's right is for them, then that's going to be what's best for the company in their special circumstance. So I would say just be vulnerable. If you're struggling with a non-compete, if you're struggling with a specific issue at work, be vulnerable. And it starts with the leader. Like, the leader has to create that kind of environment, because no one's going to open up to you as a leader if they know that you're just going to tear into them or say, don't let the door hit you on the way out. It starts with the leader.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I to keep it succinct here at the end, for me, the things that don't cost any money directly and only add value are changing the design of how you think about jobs, changing the relationship you have with employees, and actually making time to address the things that matter most. If you make time to address the things that matter most, and employees are willing to be open and vulnerable about that, and the precedent is set by the leader or leadership, as Jared talked about, that is how you can make a lot of change fairly swiftly. And you and your organizations can make some pretty impactful things happen, which affect you down the road, because that becomes known. Like, there are no more secrets about what businesses do and how they treat their employees anymore. And so that becomes known out there, and it's only going to add value to your future hiring. It's only going to add value to your own relationships and to your organization. There are so many ways that we could get into how it adds value, but those are the three things I highly recommend that don't have upfront costs. They only have benefits down the road.
All right, well, I want to end with one final question that I think encapsulates a lot of the things we've said here. During the interview process, one of the favorite questions is, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Considering all of the things that we spoke about, I think traditionally the response has been expected to be, I anticipate being at this company in 5 years and growing to this position in 5 years. But as we all know, that is a lie in most cases, because often that individual has their own personal 5-year goal and this company only fits into part of it. So what would you suggest saying in the 5-year goal question?
First of all, HR needs to be asking better questions, because if that question still be being asked, boo. Like, what a terrible question. But I do think, I mean, a little bit obviously just there, but asking somebody what they want to accomplish with your company, like, where do you want to grow? What can we offer you? I think there are still so many interviews in format and in question that create this environment like we're doing you a favor by hiring you, which is weird, right? Like, it's so weird. It's like, no, it's kind of the opposite. We're hiring somebody to be able to help us accomplish something. They're doing us a favor. So obviously there's going to be a transaction there. We're going to compensate them for that. But when you treat the interview like they are a guest that you are trying to impress, it completely changes the dynamic of the conversation. And that question particularly, you can get a sense of how you can architect an employee experience during the time there, whether it's 6 months or 6 years, of meeting their needs, helping them grow. They're going to be more engaged, they're going to be happier and more fulfilled, and you're going to tap into discretionary effort, which is the amount of work that they're willing to do above and beyond without expecting a penny more. I don't have the numbers in front of me, and I'm terrible at remembering stats anyway, but the level of monetary impact, of discretionary impact of employees on production inside organizations, it's not like a tiny little percent of like, oh, that's interesting. It's like, holy crap, like, how have we not tapped into this before? So I think, as far as like on the candidate side, if you're asked that question, maybe revisit if that's the right company for you. But if you are trying to give a good answer to show that, like, look, I understand what you're getting at. You want to make sure that I'm in this for the long haul. You want to make sure I'm not going to jump ship. Like, I'm treating your company like a stepping stone. There's certainly some understanding there, but I think that a way that a candidate can reframe that question back to the employer is citing specifically, why did they apply to the job or the company? What excited them to come in to be a part of this story for the next foreseeable future? And I think, again, going back to what Jared said, the vulnerability of where I see myself in 5 years is being able to accomplish or achieve XYZ. And I would love to have part of that story be with your organization, because I see that in the people I've interviewed with and where I've been. But I don't think it does a candidate or a company the service to just give the canned answer of, well, I can't wait to be able to grow your company and improve your profit margins. That's silly. That's just, I don't know, if managers like that kind of an answer, shame on them. They'll probably be unemployed and I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Okay. Anyway, that's all I have to say on that.
Consider an unfortunate, to her point, I consider an unfortunate poker game and bluffing match. And what are we doing exactly when we do that? The point is, if we're trying to also create these environments where people can be transparent, the transparency needs to happen right there. And employers need to start out by asking different and better questions. That's a 3-hour webinar I could talk about on that one. But but even with that, like, just break down this poker game that we're all playing in interviewing. And I find it funny when I see all these articles saying the way to ace the interview, and I go, how about we just be open and transparent? And it's more of a discussion and an agreement that this company can provide what you need and you can provide what the company needs. And if that is not the case, gone are the days where we can, I don't know, dilly-dally. I forgive that phrase, but like, gone are the days when we can just kind of dance around that idea, because people are going to find out pretty soon anyway. And things carry with you in your experience and in your network, and it's pretty easy to find out, like, how somebody performed at a company, or whether they lied to a company, or whether a company lied to them. Again, the world is much more transparent, I think, only for its own good and benefit. And we just need to break down these ridiculous questions that we have to question what they have done for us in the past either way. So
I'll just say how I would respond to that question is, I would say, hey, one thing I've learned about myself is that I typically need at least 8 hours to interview with a company. I've got a lot of questions for you. That's a great question. I still haven't made up my mind if I'm the right fit for you and if you're the right fit for me. So how about we continue to go down the rabbit hole, and when we get to the bottom, I'll let you know what my plans are on what you can do for me in the next 5 years and what I can do for you in the next 5 years. But I guarantee you, if this is a good match, that we are going to crush it and hit it outside of the park. And how long that's going to be, no idea. But if we're always on the bleeding edge of the latest and greatest for human experience, I can promise you we'll do some great things together. So here's my next question for you. And then I would go into my next question.
Wow, that's great. I really love that answer. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being with me today. I really appreciate it. You all had some very interesting insights, and I think we should keep this conversation going. For all of you that are watching, we've got a bunch of these coming up. So just go to utahbusiness.com/live. One of my favorites coming up, we're going to be talking with about 6 heads of huge healthcare companies in Utah. We've got them all sitting on one stage, and we're going to do a deep dive 2-hour panel on what exactly it's been like to work during the pandemic this year. So join us, utahbusiness.com/live, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.
thank you, Elle. Thank you, Utah
Thanks.
Business.